Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next in the series of deep dives on the Foreman codebase. Gilvin here, and today we've got one of our senior devs, Daniel, who's going to be talking us through the taxonomy codebase. Taxonomies, if you don't know, are the general name we give to locations and organizations, which is a much loved and much hated feature at the same time. So we're gonna talk through some of the codebase and how it works. And then we're going to move on to a bit of a discussion about what the future of that is and which way we might want to go with it. So I'm going to hand over to you, Daniel.
All right. Good afternoon. Before we get started with the code, in case someone's not familiar with it, I guess I'm going to demo quickly how taxonomies look like in case you don't use it on your Foreman instance. Here you can see. I hope you can see my screen. You should see a Foreman dashboard. Hold on, let me share this again because I think you're seeing my console.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll share the whole screen. Okay, so now you should be seeing a dashboard. In case you have taxonomies enabled, which you can do either during Foreman installer or after you install Foreman, you can go to etc Foreman settings.yaml, and there you can enable taxonomies, locations and organizations by setting locations enabled to true or false. Anyway, after you do that, this will show up on your top left corner of your Foreman instance, where you will see a drop down with the organizations and locations available on your Foreman. At first, you won't have any, and what an organization is or a location is basically a way of organizing Foreman resources into groups. So it's what's called multi-tenancy. So users in an organization or allocation will only be able to see things in that organization or location. So in this case, we may have subnets. Like here, we may say, well, only this network should be available to users in that subnet, and so forth. In case you want to allow all resources within an organization, you can just check a button, all resource. In this case, it's compute resources, but it can be anything. And in that case, they will be available. All of your resources will be available in that organization. Another feature of organizations and locations is that you may have parameters here. These parameters work basically like global parameters. They are passed onto your host the same way global parameters are passed. So that when you go try to create a new host, actually we can do this now. If I try to create a new host, and that host is in that organization, we'll see a global parameter that is inheriting from there. After you have organizations and locations installed, not if you're an admin, you have the option of not scoping the resources that you create. Like if I create a compute resource, I may choose not to scope it because I'm an admin. But if you're a regular Foreman user, you'll be forced to, well, your resources will be on the organizations that belong to your users. So if we go to users, we can set organizations and locations for our users here, and we can also set a default location and organization for our users there. The only object in Foreman that needs to have an organization for sure is the host. Once you have enabled it, locations and organizations, you'll have to match your organizations your hosts to an organization, and you will also have to make sure that host groups, environments, and so forth belong in the same organization that your host belongs in. So now that I've spoken a little bit about what it does, I'm going to go into the code and show you basically how we do all these checks. How do we make sure that when a user goes through all hosts, he or she only sees the hosts in a certain organization. Let me share the console now. Okay, so I guess the purpose of this deep dive was to explain to developers how taxonomies work on the back end. So that part is what I'm going to start now. First off, the base of the whole taxonomy feature is the taxonomy class. The taxonomy class provides things like the authorizable module, which simply allows it to have a filter so that you can restrict taxonomy access by roles, and it also provides it also includes the nested ancestry common, which is basically saying that taxonomies, organization, and locations can be merged, can be nested. So you can have, for instance, allocation data center A and sub locations like data center A / rack 10. Okay, so aside from that, one thing that maybe some people will be confused at first would be this line, ignore types. Ignore types is basically the way taxonomies allow a kind of resource to be completely available within that taxonomy. So there's no, so as I showed before, when you go edit a taxonomy and you click on domains, you can click on all domains should be available in this taxonomy. Well, then domains get added into this list of ignored types. I just have to explain that one because I think the name doesn't make it very clear. It provides association with all resources like users, smart proxies, computer resources, and so forth. And these associations are not straight from the resource to taxonomy, but there's a joint table, TaxableTaxonomies, that allows us to implement taxonomy resource relationship in the database. Just so you can see what it is, TaxableTaxonomy, it may have been called taxable resource taxonomy or maybe resource taxonomy. It's a very simple table that all that it has is a taxonomy ID and the taxable ID and the type. I'll actually open it in. I'll show you an example of it. So, taxable resource is anything in Foreman that contains the module Taxonomix with an X. And it's basically all that we saw before, like media, provision templates, partition tables, users, basically anything that you can assign organizations and locations to is a taxable resource. Okay, so taxable.
Can I just ask then?
Yeah.
The has many lines in the taxonomy class. That's obviously a hard-coded list. Presumably, we use the taxable taxonomies table, so it's easy to extend for like plugins and things like that, right?
Well, I think the reason we have the taxable taxonomies table is so that it would be very easy to add any new type to this, as long as it's in the Taxonomix module.
Right.
It's fine because it will have a taxable type, and the same way it provides a unified table for organizations and locations and their connections to models.
Right, got you. Cool. Sorry, carry on.
So here you can see example of a taxable taxonomy. A taxable taxonomy just contains taxonomy ID, which can be a location or an organization. So in this case, it's an organization, but how does this relation happen? Well, by having a taxable taxonomies table, we're basically avoiding having an taxable organization and taxable location table. It's basically why we have it. So any of the records in taxable taxonomies is associated with a taxonomy, like I said, and with a resource of a certain type. In this case, it's an environment, but it can be anything. It can be a medium. It can be an operating system. It can be anything that is taxable, as we call it. So anything that's a taxable resource can be in taxable taxonomies. So maybe. Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, don't forget that that Hangouts tends to mute while you're typing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was just saying that if you if you have a model in a plugin that you want to add taxonomies to it, it's as simple as including the Taxonomix module in it, and as long as you do that, it will have a taxable type when it's added to taxable taxonomies, so that taxable taxonomies will recognize it just by that. Taxable ID, it's basically a generic. In Rails, it's called polymorphic, as you can see above. It's basically a generic field for an ID for a taxable type. So they have to be. So taxable ID and taxable type have to be unique. So you couldn't have, for instance, a same taxable ID and taxable type twice in the same taxonomy. Anyway, that's just the detail. Let's go back to taxonomy. Sure, what happened with I don't know exactly what happened.
Careful, your microphone's cutting out a lot because you're typing at the same time as talking.
Sorry, I think I'm done with typing.
Fair enough. No, it's just so that you're aware of it. It's really easy to do, and it's not your fault. It's a nasty feature of Hangouts that we can't turn off.
Okay. Yeah. Back to taxonomy. You can see all relations go through taxable taxonomies, and it's all the same table. We just specify the source type and the join table, which is taxable taxonomies for all of them. What else does it provide? Oh, it provides parameters. The implementation of this method, if you have worked on parameters on host or host group, it's very similar. I'm guessing it's possible to extract some of this behavior to somewhere, but what it does is simply to pull all parameters from the taxonomy and the parent, well, all the hierarchy above a certain taxonomy. Anyway, what else? We also have the concept of default templates, which is templates that are seeded by Foreman are marked as default templates, and default templates are available throughout the application, no matter which taxonomy, which organizational or location you're in, they will be available. And that's, I think, all that a person would normally need to know about taxonomy.rb. The only bits that, in my opinion, are a bit confusing are the taxable taxonomies table and ignore types attribute. As I said before, ignore types. In case you don't remember, it's just a list of resources that can be ignored, that data matter within that organization. So, for instance, if I have users in that ignore types list, that means that all the users will be available within that organization. Okay, now let's go to organization and location. Okay, these are very simple models. All they do is to specify their relationship with parameters. So all that it does is to ensure that you can have locations within an organization. So let's say if an organization is, I don't know, a state, you could have locations within that state, like let's say a subdivision of a state, maybe cities or something like that. So these are very simple and small models, and all that they do is take care of parameters, relationship with organization and location, and the opposite. The opposite of association, organization with location and location with organization. Okay, so they're basically identical. Let's go to Taxonomix, which is the well, if we go to a resource that can be scoped by a taxonomy, we'll have to include this. So let's actually see that module and see what is it about. Okay, so the Taxonomix module, all that it does is to provide the opposite of the has-many relation that you can see on taxonomy.rb. So on taxonomy.rb, we would have things like media, has-many media through taxable taxonomies. In here, we have has-many locations through taxable taxonomies. And all that it does is to provide associations and active record with a condition, like has-many locations just looks in taxable taxonomies with this scope type. The taxonomy type must be location. Because it's looking in taxable taxonomies, it's the same table for both organization and locations. And other than that, it also provides a check, which is this, validate, ensure taxonomies are now escalated. This check is basically to make sure that an admin can create global objects, global resources, like a global compute resource that has no taxonomies, but a regular user will always have to. Let me actually look for the definition. But a regular user would have to make sure that all objects that the user creates belong in the organizational locations that the user has. So if I'm a user and I'm in locations data center A and data center B, anything that I create must be in data center A or data center B. Only admins can create things that are not in any location or organization. So that's a check that we add to all models, like we saw before. This is present in all. This is present in all of these models. So subnets or environments and anything that you can assign a taxonomy to. And I'm guessing that some of the Taxonomix model could possibly go into nested ancestry comment. I'm saying that because we also do these kind of things where we fetch taxonomy IDs from parents and so forth here. And possibly those methods could be just generic for any nested resource. All right. So taxonomy, taxonomix, and taxable taxonomy are the, let's call them, the core methods for the tendency model in Foreman. Most other models and controllers need not to be aware of these classes, but we have a permission system in Foreman. When you go to roles and create a role with filters, they can also be assigned to taxonomies, and the authorizer that makes sure that permission checks happen for regular filters is also aware of taxonomies. So let's go to the authorizer to see how that happens. All right. So here we have a find collection method. The find collection method is called on controllers. Basically, when let's say when you go to the hosts page and you want to see all hosts, what the find collection method in authorizer is doing is making sure that it shows the hosts that you are allowed to see by your permissions. So here we have this method, this call that makes sure that you only see hosts within your role scope. And if you have taxonomies, what this will do as well is to try to look for your current enabled taxonomy, organization, or location, and then create some taxonomy conditions for this call. So if you go to /hosts and you are in location data center A, this will create a SQL query that will only show you things from data center A. Okay, so that's, I think, the most important check that we do. One thing that is important to be aware of is that filters can also contain taxonomies. I'm going to show you how that works in a second. Let me share the Foreman screen again. Okay. It looks like I'm sharing it. Okay, I think I should be sharing the Foreman new host page right now.
Yep, that's right.
All right, so when you go to roles and you go to filters, okay, maybe that one is not the best example. I'm not sure this one can be. Yeah, this one. So some filters will have will be able to be scoped by organization and location, and some others will not. And I'm going to explain in a moment what it means for a filter to be scoped. Okay, so compute resources is a good one. So in here we have a filter compute resource. Resource type just indicates the kind of resource that we are filtering on. We allow all permissions like power, view, edit, and we didn't filter this resource by anything. We just say let's show all compute resources to people who have this filter. And you can see there is no filter here. There's no we're supposed to be showing everything, but we're also we can also scope these by organization. And in this case, it may not matter a lot because I'm a I'm an admin in this Foreman, but if I was a regular user creating a filter, I would have to check this organization for sure. Even if from the moment you check an organization here, you are creating a filter in here that is not really seen. So the moment you put I check this Lobato organization here, it's basically like doing organization equals Lobato. And as you can see, well, let me remove it. I'm not really writing anything there, but it's the way it's done on the back end. The way that Foreman filters is by, sorry, the way that Foreman applies this filter by organizations is by creating a search filter with that. I'm going to share my Foreman screen again. Sorry, my console. Okay. Sorry, I got muted again. Let's go to filter, and this is the method that I was looking for. Build taxonomy search. This method is called after you create a new filter and you assign an organization or location to this filter. So what happens is, if the resource that we saved can have organizations and locations, so if that resource includes the Taxonomix module, any filter that has an organization or location will create a filter search that, wow, that's complicated to express. Any filter for a resource that contains an organization or location will create a search filter that contains, sorry, that restricts that resource by organization or location. So the way we showed it before. So it would be simpler if I could jump back and forth between the Foreman and the other one.
If you choose to share your desktop rather than a single window, it should allow you to swap between.
I know. The problem is that I have two screens, and it doesn't allow me to share just one screen.
Oh, but really? That's interesting, because when I share, it shares just one of my monitors, which is weird. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm sorry. If you already know, then I'm not helping. Carry on.
Yeah, so just going back to filter, what I'm trying to explain is it's a simple concept, but it's a bit difficult to see on the code. It's just that when I check this Lobato thing, when I check any organization here or location, and I save this model, without the user knowing anything, we're creating a search filter here. And that's it. I just want to explain that thing. There's a little known. It's little known, and it's basically how organizations work with filters.
Right. It's just additive, right? It's in addition to everything else you specified on the page.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
But there's not a lot more in terms of code that I think that I can explain. I was just going to say, so for plugins, if you want to add taxonomies to model 20 plugins, I have an example in Foreman Docker. Container is a model that is scoped by taxonomy, and it was just it was that simple. It was just including that module, Taxonomix, and then it works.
Cool.
So what else? Just so. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think we've got Eric on the call as well, who might be able to shed a little bit of light about what it's like using taxonomies within Katello. Maybe it might be a good, since we've already onto the topic of plugins, that might be a nice point to maybe talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I won't show any code, but I will at least talk, I guess, as best I can about some of our requirements. That's kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think the two things we have left on our agenda really are a little bit about sort of what the requirements are when you've got an existing plugin that's using taxonomies. What is it expecting from that, right? And then we've got a more general chat, I think, about what the problems are with the model that we have and what we might want to do about it. And I think Daniel's got some thoughts to put across on that. So maybe if you start with your sort of the requirement side and how Katello uses taxonomies, and then we can talk about the problems.
All right. So the biggest thing is that they are required with Katello. The organization idea is fundamental to how certain aspects work, and for those that haven't ever used Katello, the big difference between the way sort of Foreman by itself uses it and Katello use it is that in Foreman you can map the objects that come along to any number of orgs except for hosts, right? So you can map architectures to say 4 different orgs, but everything in Katello is mapped and tied to a single org only, and so we make sure that all of our objects end up that way. And because of that, we also turn off some things, and I say it's quote unquote turn them off because there's not like a API or setting for this. But for example, we can't handle nested orgs at the moment, so we turn that off. A big driver for why we have this single org idea is that we have currently a more multi-tenant model where within an org you have access to only what is in the org, and part of that is also dictated by the Red Hat product and repository model that we're supporting, and how you get subscriptions into the application. I will say there is some future work to enable some sharing. It's not that we can't do that with certain types of content and stuff, but it is a principle with regards to taxonomies that we've lived by for since the inception of the project. We do extend taxonomies a little in our code. We've actually reduced that scale down as much as possible, where we take advantage of everything that's there, except that we also need to add one attribute that we call label to the database scheme for organizations especially. And the big reason for that is we need something that is human readable and is unique. So name could change, but label, which is in our world, is the thing that can't change. Once you create the label is stuck, and generally it is restricted on what characters can be in there, but it is typically human readable. Sometimes it can be a UUID, which isn't as human readable, but it's an immutable field so that we can track that entity across some of our backends like Pulp or like Candlepin. Sorry, Pulp doesn't have organizations, but we do use it to identify repository paths, for example, and so that when we deploy a repo file, for example, that organization label field that we have and carry shows up as sort of a human readable repo name. Otherwise, we tend to use the organization object as is, and we don't alter how it's used for any other existing Foreman objects. I think one thing that I can say that we have ran into before is how you have to make sure that everything is associated properly with an organization to be able to properly provision, and we've done some tweaking where we try to auto-associate certain things to make the user's lives easier. I think that's a pretty good background and covers the big things of how we use taxonomies and where the biggest differences lie and why we have some restrictions and both restrictions in an implementation sense and in a design choice. So I'll leave it there with and answer any questions or contribute to the discussion from here on out.
Cool. Thanks very much, Eric. So I think for me that just goes to illustrate just how far you can push things, particularly when you're working in Ruby, right, where you can start overriding things in plugins. But I mean, it's an interesting contrast when you talk about something like the Docker plugin, which was literally like a few lines where you just include Taxonomix and it works, right? All the way up to the Katello end of things, where actually you're making very heavy use of this particular feature, but in a very specific way, and it makes the whole workflow possible. So it's pretty interesting stuff. So Daniel, I think you wanted to talk a bit about the sort of the problems with the current model, didn't you?
Okay. What I was going to say, I was going to go through how, at least from the user's point of view, it might be a little confusing to know whether a filter permission is more how to say this, whether when you have a conflict with how a filter protects a resource and a taxonomy protects another resource, the same resource, which one prevails. The thing is, to boil this down a bit, can taxonomies be implemented in terms of roles and filters? Well, what a taxonomy does is simply to it doesn't do this internally, but in terms of behavior, what it does is to add view resource permission to a model, and search filter that only allows you to see resources that belong to another resource. So I was thinking possibly you could have a filter to view a taxonomy, and if host, domain, environment, and smart proxy and so forth are within a taxonomy, then allow the host to be seen, otherwise don't. But I think it's a bit of a dangerous route to go, because at the moment we don't handle these very well. If you create a new host and let's say you have
so sorry, just to jump in, just to clarify for the people watching, I think we kind of missed a step there. The thing we're discussing, right, is that there's some suggestion. There's people that don't really like taxonomy, right? And you've touched on it. The part of the problem is that we have two different authorization systems, right? That's really the core of it.
That's the core of the issue. Yeah.
We have the authorization. We have a single authorization system, right? And that integrates with LDAP and AD and single sign-on and Kerberos and all this stuff. So you can get logged into Foreman in a nice, consistent way. But once you're in, what you can see goes down two paths at the same time, right? Because there's the filters and there's the taxonomies. And so I think what you're discussing now is whether or not we can merge these into a single thing, right? And what would that look like, and what are the constraints and so on. So have I got that right?
Right.
Right. Okay. That was just so that the people who weren't aware of the sort of previous debate had an idea of what you were talking about. So right. So you were talking about how this might look for a host, right?
Yeah. So since you were saying that taxonomies were a different authorization model, well, they're like a mini authorization model because the only thing they provide is view permissions, right? If something is in a taxonomy that in an organization, that just means that you can see it, or you can't see it, but nothing else. Given that, could you implement that in terms of filters and say, well, if I have a filter to view this organization, then everything that is within that organization, I should see it, or not. And the thing is that I'm not sure if changing taxonomy text, the taxonomy text that we do in authorizer. Let me think again. Yeah, we do them on authorizer and filter that RB. These are the places where we check for taxonomies when we're going through the UI. Basically, any action that you do or any resource that is shown to you is filtered through filter.rb and authorizer.rb. It's a few checks that we do in these two classes that I showed before. What I'm saying is that changing these taxonomy checks for filter checks, I'm not sure it's going to make a lot of sense because, well, I think it could work to have let's say a special class, special resource in Foreman that once you can see that resource, you can see anything that belongs in that resource. Like once you can see an organization, you can see anything that belongs in that organization. But I'm not sure there is much to gain from changing these taxonomy checks in filter and unauthorizer for anything right now. I'll be open for suggestions. I think we can probably refactor taxonomy.rb and maybe make it cleaner or something, or more understandable, because if no one comes and explains to you, hey, authorizer and filters where filters and taxonomies kind of act together. If no one explains that to you right now, it's not really clear at all. But other than that, I'm not sure we should spend the time to move it.
I guess
to move taxonomy to filter.
Yeah, I guess the confusion for me is it's actually, I think it's quite easy to see how it works at a host level, right? Because a host kind of only really belongs in one taxonomy at a time anyway, and it's very, very straightforward to see how a filter applies to that. But when I think of something like a compute resource or a subnet or something like that, well, I mean, one of the problems the classic problems we have with taxonomies, and I think Eric touched on it, is the mismatches, right? Where you get things that are assigned in slightly odd ways, and they don't line up, and then you don't see what you're expecting to see when you create, say, a new host, and you go to put it in a subnet, and the subnet's not there, and you're like, well, what's going on? And when I start thinking about situations like that, I don't know how it would look with filters. Like, I don't understand. It becomes almost like a tagging model, right? Where you start adding, like, just acts as taggable onto every object in the database, and then you tag everything with its locations, right? I mean,
yeah, I think from the user point of view, it's fine as it is right now. What I was trying to suggest is for it to work. So let's say when you add, let's say. You go to edit domains when on a taxonomy, and you check all domains. Doing that, it's basically the equivalent of going to a filter and select domain and check unlimited, right? And check view domains. I can try to show you on the browser, but.
Right.
What I'm saying is it's the same kind of operation that could possibly be implemented in the same way on the backend.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with you that the UI is fine, right? I mean, apart from you made the point about how if you use that second tab on the filters page to check some taxonomies, that's kind of hidden unless you go and actually explicitly look at it. And I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think that's something we could improve on the UI side. But other than that, I agree. It pretty much works, right?
Yeah. Just so you can see it, the event, to call it in some way, that I was talking about. Let's say you go to and try to edit Subnet here. I think you can see my screen, right?
Yep. That's right.
Yeah. So you click and edit Subnet, and let's say. Well, you have all the subnets, or you have here the home network subnet. Well, this is basically the same as having a filter. Resource subnet. Say view subnets, and unlimited would be equivalent to have all subnets checked.
Yep.
And not having unlimited would be equivalent to having name equals home network, right? That would be like the same as this. So what I'm saying is that why, instead of making the taxonomy special checks that we do right now, we could possibly think at most about on the back end saving a number of filters that perform the same thing, and possibly get rid of the special checks that we do for taxonomies right now.
Right. Gotcha. I see. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But as you say, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's the thing that I didn't see any clear major benefit for potentially too much work. So
yeah. I think there's some clear benefits. They just are a lot of work, right? It's like I guess for me, as someone who has done development that's touched on taxonomies, the amount of time I've spent fixing the taxonomy tests makes me hate them a lot, because they're so specific. And if we could just move everything back to working through roles and locations, that would work brilliantly well. Roles and filters, that would work brilliantly well from that perspective. And just having a single code path makes everything nice, right? But nobody sees a lot of benefit. There's a certain amount of technical debt, but it works, and we don't need to mess it. I mean, Eric, to come back to you, how does the Katello world fit in? If that were to come up, I mean, is that something that plugins or complex plugins, shall we say, would be in favor of? Does it make your life simpler, or is it just simply not a factor?
You're asking about transitioning to pure filters?
Yes. I don't think anyone's suggesting we're going to do it tomorrow, right? But just in the interest of having a chat about it.
I think there's some that I've worked on Katello that might agree with that idea, because that's how they kind of see organizations, for example. However, the way we use them and the way we try to treat them, at least today, with this idea of multi-tenancy, I think it's sort of it feels a little more like you're, round square or round square. Putting a square peg in a round hole. It's sort of it is a defined entity thing that has a fairly, I don't know, it is a complex code, but on the surface it's a fairly simple object, in my opinion. Granted, it takes a lot underneath, like I said, underneath the covers to make it work, but it's doing one particular thing and handling that, which I don't think is necessarily the same as filters, which is around that's the type of stuff where it comes down to authorization. To me, is not the same as I'm segmenting this stuff over here and I'm segmenting this stuff over here.
Right. So for you, it's they are fundamentally different things. It's not simply a case of two types of authorization.
Yeah, I mean, you do give people access to an org, and for example, let's say I'm going to give user A access to an org, and then the user has access to things in that org, but it's sort of, I'm putting you over here in this giant sandbox to play with, is the way we tend to more think about it, versus I'm giving you sort of dynamic access to this set of things, or dynamic static access to these exact attributes. I would look at it too as if that is a fundamental principle of being able to say these things are in this particular bucket, and it is a defined bucket with a name, and you can switch into the context of that bucket. Trying to simplify it down to filters would make managing it not that easy, and would remove that sort of fundamental idea. Now, if we moved away from that concept, then potentially filters start to make a little more sense. But like I said, until that sort of concept of I am trying to bucket a bunch of stuff over here and segment it goes away, I don't see, and switch in and out of those contexts, I don't see the benefit of moving to a filtered approach.
Makes sense. And I think, unless anyone's got any last comments, I think we're running up to the end of the hour. So, are there any closing comments you want to make, Daniel?
Nothing much. If you need any help, if you're working on taxonomies, just hit me up on the Foreman dev on IOC, dlobatog there. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. We can continue the debate on the mailing list thread. I will post the recording there, and if anyone watching this has further comments about taxonomies, then we can discuss that. Thanks very much to both Eric and Daniel for joining me today, and we'll see you again next time.